In Mexico's brutal drug war, thousands of people have vanished. Some were soldiers, some were rivals, some were just in the wrong place at the wrong time. But behind many of those deaths is one name, a man so powerful that entire cities lived in fear of his cartel, a man whose organization spread violence across a nation and deadly drugs across borders. This is the story of Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes and the empire of blood he built. They vanish without warning. Lives are shattered, yet the world moves on as if nothing happened. Some stories refuse to fade, echoing long after the headlines disappear. In Season 2, we dig deeper, uncovering the hidden truths behind the whispers of the taken. El Mencho, the empire built on graves. There are men in this world whose names carry fear. Not the kind of fear that comes from ghost stories or legends whispered around a campfire, but the kind that lives in the real world, the kind that makes people lock their doors a little earlier at night. Names spoken in low voices, names people hesitate to say too loudly, names whispered quietly in neighborhoods where mothers pull their children inside before the sun goes down, where shop owners glance nervously down the street before closing their doors, where entire communities have learned that sometimes the safest thing you can do is simply stay silent. These are names that make police officers hesitate before knocking on certain doors. Names that echo through prison walls, cartel safe houses, and government war rooms alike. Names that carry a reputation so violent, so powerful, that even hardened criminals know the consequences of crossing them. One of those names is Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, but to most of the world he is known simply as El Mencho, a name that travels far beyond the man himself, a name attached not just to one person, but to an entire empire of violence, a name that has become synonymous with fear across large parts of Mexico. Because behind that name lies something much bigger. Behind it stands the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, an organization that rose from the chaos of Mexico's drug war and quickly became one of the most powerful and brutal criminal groups the country had ever seen. Where other cartels once operated in the shadows, this one grew through intimidation, spectacle, and ruthless violence. Cities felt its presence, rival gangs feared its retaliation, and entire regions learned the cost of standing in its way. Because wherever the cartel expanded, wherever its influence spread, wherever its convoys rolled into town under the cover of darkness, one thing always seemed to follow behind it: fear, violence, and death. The rise of a cartel king, before the armored convoys, before the viral videos that would spread across the internet, showing long rows of masked gunmen standing shoulder to shoulder, dressed in black tactical gear, and holding military-grade rifles like an army preparing for war. Before government officials in Mexico and the United States placed massive bounties on his head and declared him one of the most wanted men on earth, El Mencho was simply another man trying to survive in a violent world. He grew up in a country already scarred by corruption, poverty, and the expanding influence of organized crime. In many places, the line between survival and criminality was dangerously thin. For young men with few opportunities and fewer protections, the drug trade often appeared to be the only path toward power, money, and respect. But the world he entered was not a simple criminal enterprise. It was a battlefield. Cartels fought for territory the same way nations fight wars, with guns, with intimidation, and with the understanding that weakness could mean death. In that world, survival required more than luck. It required ruthlessness. And somewhere along that path, survival began to change. The man who once fought to stay alive began fighting for something more: power, influence, control. And as that power grew, so did the violence surrounding it. Because power in the cartel world does not grow quietly. It grows through fear, through dominance, through the understanding that anyone who challenges you must be destroyed quickly and publicly, enough that no one else ever considers doing the same. Under his leadership, the Jalisco New Generation Cartel did not behave like the older cartels that had come before it. Many of those groups preferred secrecy. They operated quietly, avoiding unnecessary attention from the government, while moving drugs through hidden routes and corrupt networks. But CJNG chose a different strategy. They ruled through fear. They ruled through spectacle. They ruled through violence so brutal and so public that it was impossible for anyone to ignore. Videos began appearing online showing heavily armed fighters riding through rural roads in long convoys of armored vehicles. Masked men stood in formation like soldiers, displaying weapons normally seen on battlefields rather than city streets. The message was clear. This was not just a cartel, it was an army, and armies conquer territory. Across Mexico, the signs of that conquest began appearing. Bodies hanging from highway bridges, displayed for everyone passing below to see. Handwritten messages attached to the victims. Warnings directed at rivals, traitors, or anyone suspected of cooperating with the government. In quiet rural towns where life had once moved slowly and peacefully, investigators began uncovering mass graves hidden beneath fields and abandoned properties. Some held a few bodies, others held dozens. Many of the victims had simply disappeared weeks or months earlier, leaving families searching for answers that would never come. Entire villages suddenly found themselves caught between two impossible choices: support the cartel or resist and risk becoming the next example. And in many places, resistance wasn't really an option. Because when a cartel wants control, it does not negotiate, it does not debate, it enforces its rule the only way it knows how: through fear, through violence, through the constant reminder that power belongs to whoever is willing to use it most brutally. The message delivered again and again in towns, cities, and remote mountain roads across Mexico was simple and terrifying: submit or disappear. The first graves. The early victims were rivals, members of competing cartels who stood in the way of expansion. But they were not always the powerful figures people imagine when they think of organized crime. Many of them were young men, barely out of their teenage years, recruited from poor neighborhoods where opportunity was scarce and desperation was common. In many parts of Mexico, the cartels knew exactly where to look for new soldiers. They went to places where families struggled to survive, where schools were underfunded, where legitimate jobs paid barely enough to cover basic necessities. They offered money, protection, and something that felt like respect. To a young man growing up in those conditions, the offer could seem impossible to refuse. Join the cartel, carry a weapon, protect the territory. And suddenly, instead of being invisible, you were part of something powerful. But what many of them didn't understand, at least not at first, was that they weren't joining a brotherhood. They were stepping onto a battlefield. The cartel wars spreading across western Mexico were not quiet conflicts fought behind closed doors. They were brutal, open struggles for control of territory, trafficking routes, and influence. Entire regions became war zones where alliances shifted quickly and violence could erupt without warning. Gun battles began breaking out across highways and rural roads. Convoys of armed men clashed in sudden bursts of violence that turned stretches of pavement into scenes of chaos and destruction. Vehicles riddled with bullet holes were sometimes left abandoned on the roadside, silent evidence of fights that had taken place only hours earlier. In cities, the violence was even more terrifying. Shootouts erupted in the middle of crowded streets, sometimes in broad daylight, with civilians diving for cover as gunfire echoed between buildings. Restaurants, gas stations, and busy intersections could suddenly become battlefields as rival groups confronted each other without hesitation. For the people who lived in these areas, normal life became unpredictable. A routine trip to work could suddenly turn dangerous. A quiet evening could be shattered by the sound of automatic gunfire in the distance. And after the violence ended, the aftermath was often left behind for everyone to see. Bodies in pickup trucks abandoned on rural roads. Bodies lying in fields just outside small towns. Bodies left on the pavement of city streets, sometimes covered with crude messages meant for rival groups. In some cases, victims were deliberately displayed in places where they could not be ignored. Highways, bridges, busy intersections, locations where passing drivers and pedestrians would immediately understand the message being sent. These weren't random acts of violence. They were calculated. Every body left behind was meant to serve a purpose, a warning to enemies, a reminder to potential traitors. Proof to anyone watching that this cartel was willing to go further than the others. In the brutal mathematics of cartel warfare, violence becomes a form of communication. The more terrifying the message, the fewer people are willing to challenge it. And as the influence of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel expanded under the leadership of Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes, those messages became more frequent. More bodies appeared. More territory changed hands. More young recruits found themselves pulled into a conflict that demanded absolute loyalty and offered little chance of escape. Because once someone stepped into that world, walking away was rarely an option. Each death left behind another empty chair at a family's dinner table, another missing son, another brother who never returned home. But inside the logic of cartel expansion, those losses were simply part of the cost of doing business. Because every rival eliminated meant less resistance. Every territory captured meant more power, and every corpse left behind became another brick in the growing empire that El Mencho was building. War with the state. Eventually, the violence grew too large to ignore. For years, cartel battles had erupted across parts of Mexico, but what was happening now was different. The scale of the violence was expanding. Entire regions were beginning to feel the pressure of a cartel that was no longer operating quietly in the shadows. Shootouts were being reported more frequently. Highways were being blocked by burning vehicles. Convoys of heavily armed men were being spotted traveling openly through towns and rural roads. Communities that had once been distant from the front lines of the drug war suddenly found themselves living inside it. At some point, the government could no longer look away. The response came in the form of soldiers, federal police, and eventually units of the National Guard. These forces were deployed across western Mexico in an effort to disrupt the growing power of the Jalisco New Generation Cartel, the organization led by Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes. Military checkpoints began appearing on highways. Helicopters circled over remote areas believed to be cartel strongholds. Special operations units were tasked with locating and capturing cartel leadership. But there was one major problem. CJNG wasn't afraid. Unlike many criminal organizations that preferred to avoid direct confrontation with the state, this cartel had spent years preparing for it. They had resources, they had manpower, and they had weapons that looked like they belonged on battlefields rather than city streets. Armored trucks reinforced with metal plating, convoys equipped with heavy machine guns, high-powered rifles capable of penetrating police vehicles. In some cases, even rocket-propelled grenades. Their fighters dressed in tactical gear, moving in organized formations that looked less like a criminal gang and more like a paramilitary force. And when government forces attempted to move against them, the cartel did something that shocked many observers. They fought back, not in quick ambushes designed to escape, but in full-scale confrontations. One of the most dramatic moments came in 2015 during a government operation aimed at capturing El Mencho himself. Mexican military forces launched a coordinated effort to locate and arrest the cartel leader, deploying troops and air support in an attempt to cut off escape routes and close in on his location. But the cartel was ready. Gunmen loyal to CJNG opened fire with heavy weapons, turning the operation into a fierce battle. As the confrontation escalated, a Mexican military helicopter flying over the area became a target. Cartel fighters fired a rocket-propelled grenade. The projectile struck the aircraft. Moments later, the helicopter spiraled out of control and crashed. 9 soldiers and police officers lost their lives that day. 9 men who had been sent into a dangerous mission with the goal of weakening one of the most powerful criminal organizations in the country. That night, 9 families received devastating phone calls. Wives were told their husbands would not be coming home. Children lost fathers. Parents lost sons. The kind of phone call that no family is ever prepared to receive. And behind the tragedy was a simple, brutal reality. Those men had died trying to stop a cartel leader whose growing empire had already left countless others buried in the ground. Men who had sworn an oath to protect their country had entered the fight against organized crime and paid the ultimate price. But the helicopter attack also sent another message. A message that echoed far beyond the battlefield where it occurred. It showed the world that this cartel was not just willing to challenge the government. It was willing to wage war against it. The mass graves. Across Mexico, investigators began uncovering places that would haunt them forever. Not battlefields, not crime scenes surrounded by police tape and flashing lights, but quiet places, hidden places, places where terrible things had been buried beneath the surface of everyday life. Shallow pits hidden in the countryside, fields where the soil looked slightly darker, slightly softer than the ground around it. Remote patches of land where grass struggled to grow, where the earth had clearly been disturbed and then hastily covered again. Sometimes the clues came from anonymous tips, sometimes from terrified witnesses who waited months, sometimes years before finding the courage to speak. And sometimes the discoveries came from something far more disturbing: the smell. Neighbors would report a strange odor drifting across the land, something sour and heavy in the air that seemed to grow stronger in the heat. When authorities arrived and began digging into the ground, they found bones, sometimes just a few bodies, other times dozens, and sometimes so many remains were buried in the same place that forensic teams needed weeks to recover them all, carefully removing fragments of human life from the soil piece by piece. Each bone had once belonged to someone, someone with a name, someone with a family, someone who had once laughed, worked, dreamed about their future. But now they were being pulled from the earth in silence, their identities often lost to time and violence. Some of the victims were rival gang members caught in the brutal cycle of cartel warfare. Young men who had chosen a dangerous path and paid the ultimate price for it. Others were migrants, people traveling through unfamiliar territory, hoping to reach a new life across a distant border. Men and women who believed they were only passing through, never realizing they had stepped into land controlled by people who viewed them not as human beings, but as disposable obstacles. And then there were the ones who hurt investigators the most to find: the civilians. People who had nothing to do with the drug trade, farm workers, taxi drivers, students, ordinary people who had simply been in the wrong place at the wrong time, a witness, a mistaken identity, a random encounter with someone who believed silence was easier to guarantee through violence. In many cases, families had spent years searching before these graves were discovered. They hung posters with their loved ones' faces across towns and cities. They walked from police station to police station asking the same desperate question: have you seen them? Mothers carried photographs worn from being held too often. Fathers drove across entire states following rumors and false leads. Sisters and brothers checked hospitals, prisons, and morgues, anywhere that might hold even the smallest clue. If you're enjoying the video so far, please take a second to like and subscribe. It's a huge help to the channel. Thank you. Now back to the story. Some families formed search groups, walking through remote fields themselves with shovels and sticks, probing the earth in hopes of finding answers. Imagine the unbearable moment when those families finally learn the truth, when investigators call them, when they are asked to come identify a piece of clothing, a watch, a shoe, something that once belonged to the person they have spent years hoping to see alive again. Because sometimes the bodies are never fully recovered. Sometimes there is only a fragment of bone. Sometimes there is nothing left that can be identified at all. Only the terrible certainty that somewhere beneath the soil, their loved one was lost forever. Each skeleton recovered from those hidden graves tells the same silent story. A life interrupted, a family left waiting, a future that was stolen before it ever had the chance to unfold. Someone vanished, someone erased, and for the families left behind, the pain is not only the loss itself, it is the years spent living with uncertainty, the endless questions, the empty chair at the dinner table, the birthday that passes without them, the quiet hope that maybe, just maybe, they might still walk through the door someday, until the truth is uncovered beneath the earth. And hope finally gives way to grief, because somewhere, in one of those hidden graves scattered across the countryside, someone's child was waiting to be found. The civilians? The cartel war didn't stay between criminals. At first, many people believed it would, that the violence would remain contained within the shadowy world of traffickers, rival gangs, and those who willingly stepped into the drug trade. But wars like this never stay contained for long. Eventually, the violence spreads, And when it does, it begins to seep into the fabric of everyday life. Across parts of Mexico, entire communities slowly realized that the cartel war was no longer something happening somewhere else. It was happening right outside their doors. Police chiefs who refused to cooperate with cartel demands were assassinated. Some were ambushed on their way home from work. Others were gunned down in front of their own police stations, killed in broad daylight as a message to anyone else who might consider standing against the cartel's authority. Local politicians who spoke openly about fighting organized crime became targets as well. Some disappeared before they could take office. Others were attacked while campaigning, their deaths sending a chilling signal to the rest of the political world. Opposing the cartels could cost you your life. Journalists faced an equally dangerous reality. Reporters who tried to investigate cartel activity, expose corruption, or reveal the identities of powerful criminal figures often found themselves walking a very thin line between truth and survival. Some received threats warning them to stop asking questions. Others were followed, and some simply vanished, their articles unfinished, their investigations left hanging in silence. For many communities, the disappearance of a journalist carried an unspoken message. Certain stories were not meant to be told. But perhaps the most heartbreaking victims of the cartel war were the people who had never chosen to be part of it at all. Families caught in crossfire during sudden shootouts. Drivers killed when their vehicles happened to pass through the wrong intersection at the wrong moment. Shop owners forced to close businesses they had spent their entire lives building after cartels demanded money they couldn't afford to pay. Ordinary people living ordinary lives suddenly pulled into a war they never asked to be part of. And in the communities where cartel influence grew strongest, something even more disturbing began to happen. Violence became normal. Children growing up in these areas learned things far too early, things no child should ever have to understand. They learned the difference between fireworks and gunfire. They learned that when loud bursts of automatic gunshots echoed through the streets, the safest thing to do was drop to the floor and stay quiet. They learned that when convoys of black trucks rolled through town, filled with masked men carrying rifles, it was best not to stare, not to ask questions, not to speak about it afterward, because curiosity could be dangerous. To a child growing up in those conditions, scenes that would terrify most people slowly began to feel almost routine. Gunfire was normal. Convoys of masked men were normal. Military helicopters circling overhead were normal. And sometimes, people simply vanished. A neighbor who had lived next door for years might suddenly be gone. A classmate might stop showing up to school without explanation. A shop that had been open for decades might close overnight, its doors locked and its windows dark. No one would talk about it. No one would ask too many questions. Because in places where fear controls daily life, silence becomes a form of survival. And that silence is exactly what allows violence to continue. Because when entire communities are forced to live in fear, the war stops being something that happens in the shadows. It becomes something people learn to live with every single day. The drug pipeline. But the violence didn't stop at Mexico's borders. The empire built by Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes stretched far beyond highways, fields, and cities in his home country. The Jalisco New Generation Cartel looked outward, seeing opportunity in foreign markets, and began flooding communities across North America with methamphetamine, heroin, and eventually fentanyl, a drug so potent that even a few grains could end a life. These were not the dramatic, televised shootouts people associate with the drug trade. There were no blazing trucks or convoys, no police sirens cutting through the night. These deaths were silent, invisible, personal. They happened in bedrooms where young people experimenting with drugs never woke up. They happened in bathrooms where parents found their children lifeless on the cold tile floor. They happened in cars, on highways, and alleyways, places no one would ever imagine a war could reach. Ambulances rushed to calls, but the victims were gone by the time help arrived. Paramedics could do little more than document the death, bag the body, and notify the family that their loved one would not be coming home. Parents buried children they had raised from birth. Children buried parents they had loved and depended on. Families grieved silently, often ashamed, sometimes blaming themselves, rarely understanding that the source of their pain was far away, in the hands of men who would never know the sorrow they caused. Entire communities were devastated. Schools saw attendance drop as addiction spread. Neighborhoods were haunted by grief and guilt. Weddings were canceled. Vacant homes multiplied. Funerals became a regular part of life. These deaths did not make headlines like a cartel ambush. They did not appear in videos of masked gunmen or armored convoys. They were quieter, subtler, but just as deadly. And they were part of the same empire, the same organization that had shown no mercy on highways in Mexico, the same leaders who had orchestrated mass killings, orchestrated disappearances, and terrorized entire towns. Now their reach extended silently into bedrooms across North America, turning homes into graveyards, families into mourners, and lives into statistics. Each overdose carried a weight, a young life snuffed out, a parent left grieving, a community shaken to its core. And while bullets and blood might make the news for a day, these deaths continued to pile up quietly, invisibly, relentlessly. Another shadow in the empire of fear that El Mencho had built. Because in the end, the cartel's power was not only measured in territory or wealth, it was measured in the lives it touched, the lives it destroyed, the lives that could never be brought back. And those losses, though quiet, were no less real. Fear as a weapon. The CJNG understood something that many criminal organizations never fully grasped. They understood that fear could travel faster than bullets. It could cross towns, highways, and entire regions in the blink of an eye. It didn't need to kill to control. It only needed to be seen, to be felt, to make people question whether survival was even possible if they defied the cartel. And CJNG knew how to send that message. They filmed themselves. Videos of long, armored convoys rolling down highways, the sound of roaring engines and heavy tires announcing their presence before anyone even saw them. Dozens of masked gunmen standing shoulder to shoulder, perfectly aligned, weapons glinting in the sun, automatic rifles slung across chests, grenade launchers strapped to shoulders, heavy machine guns mounted like monuments to violence. Every movement was deliberate, every formation calculated. The weapons weren't just tools, they were trophies, symbols, statements, proof that this cartel operated like an army, disciplined and ready for war. And the message was unmistakable. They were powerful, they were organized, they were everywhere, and they were not afraid of anyone. Not the police, not politicians, not rival cartels, not even the government itself. For the communities trapped under CJNG's control, the message sank deep into the psyche. For the communities trapped under CJNG's control, the message sank deep into the psyche. Families would whisper warnings to each other when convoys passed. Children learned to stay inside. Shops closed earlier. Conversations became quiet, careful. Because when fear reaches a certain level, it does something even more dangerous than paralyze. It silences resistance. People stop speaking out. People stop fighting back. People begin to accept that their lives are no longer entirely their own. And that was exactly what CJNG wanted. For many towns and neighborhoods, the spectacle of the cartel was not just a display of firepower, it was a declaration, a warning, a rule enforced not with negotiation or law, but with terror. Because when people are afraid enough, when fear seeps into every corner of daily life, they stop resisting. And in that silence, the cartel grows stronger. Because true power, El Mencho knew, isn't only about bullets or money, it's about control. It's about shaping a world where even thinking about defiance becomes too dangerous to consider. The families left behind. Every death connected to cartel violence leaves a ripple that spreads far beyond the moment it happens. It begins with a knock on the door, a phone call in the middle of the night, or a knock on a neighbor's window. And then it expands into a life that will never be the same again. A mother who never sees her son again. Her mornings are empty. Her home is silent where laughter once lived. Every time she sets the table for one, or hears a child playing down the street, she feels the absence, the weight of a life stolen before it could fully bloom. A wife who raises children alone, forced to be both mother and father. She teaches them how to navigate a world that suddenly feels cruel and unpredictable, all while carrying her own heartbreak silently. Her nights are sleepless, haunted by memories of the life she had before the world of violence intruded into her family. Parents who wait years, sometimes decades, for answers about missing daughters. They hold on to scraps of hope that she might be found alive, clinging to the possibility that one day the phone will ring with good news. But more often than not, the hope fades, replaced by a constant ache that never leaves them, a grief that becomes part of every breath, every movement, every choice they make. Siblings live with emptiness too. Brothers and sisters wonder what they could have done differently, replaying moments that feel insignificant now, burdened by the unfair weight of loss. Holidays, birthdays, and milestones become reminders that someone is forever absent, that the story of their family has been violently rewritten. These are the people whose stories rarely make headlines. The news rarely shows the mother who rocks herself to sleep, whispering her child's name into the darkness. The wife who wipes away tears while pretending to be strong in front of her children. The father who walks past the empty bedroom door, trying to hold himself together, feeling powerless in the face of a system that could not protect his loved one. But they are the ones who carry the heaviest burden. The weight is not just in the first shock of loss, it is in every day afterward. Long after the gunfire fades, long after the sirens stop, long after the cameras leave, their grief remains. It lives in the quiet moments, in the meals they prepare alone, in the beds they make with one less person, in the empty chairs at family gatherings. It lives in the questions that can never be answered. It lives in the fear that grips them when another knock comes at the door. It becomes a part of them, inseparable from their own heartbeat. And in communities across Mexico and beyond, this grief multiplies, echoing in every family touched by the empire of violence built by Nemesio Oseguera Cervantes and his Jalisco New Generation Cartel. Every life lost is a story unfinished, a future stolen, a grief that stretches endlessly across time. Because in the world of the cartel, death does not just take a life, it reshapes every life it touches. And for those left behind, the pain is permanent, forever. The true cost? No one can say exactly how many people have died because of El Mencho's empire. The numbers are impossible to calculate. Lost in the chaos of decades-long cartel wars where bullets tore through towns and families alike. Lost in the mass graves scattered across countryside and city, where bones lie hidden beneath soil, often unidentified, their stories never told. Lost in the disappearances, those missing children, parents, siblings, friends, whose families wait years, sometimes decades, clinging to hope that they will be found alive. Lost in the overdose deaths, quietly occurring in bedrooms, bathrooms, and cars, far from the gunfire, far from headlines, yet no less tragic. Lost in the countless lives destroyed indirectly, families shattered, neighborhoods terrorized, futures stolen before they even began. Each of these deaths, each disappearance, each shattered family is another mark on the ledger of an empire built on fear and violence. And while the exact number may never be known, one thing is certain: the total is staggering. It is not measured in boardrooms or bank accounts. It is not measured in convoys of armored trucks, rifles, or grenades. It is measured in empty chairs at dinner tables, in graves hidden and exposed, in mothers who cry themselves to sleep, wondering if their child will ever walk through the door again, in fathers whose hearts carry a wound that will never heal, in children who grow up in a world where gunfire is normal and the absence of a loved one is permanent. This is an empire not built on land or money, not built on influence or fame. It is an empire measured in graves, graves that stretch across towns, cities, and borders, graves that carry names, faces, and stories that the world may never know. And while El Mencho walks free, untouchable, and powerful, the evidence of his reign is written in the lives he has taken, in the families he has left behind, in the silence of empty rooms, in the permanent shadow of grief. This is the legacy of one man's ambition, a legacy measured not in achievements, but in the staggering weight of human loss. A legacy written in blood, lost in the chaos of decades-long cartel wars, where bullets tore through towns, streets, and families alike. Lost in the mass graves scattered across countryside and city, where bones lie hidden beneath soil, often unidentified, their stories never told. Lost in the disappearances, children who never came home, parents who vanished without a trace, siblings and friends whose absence left an emptiness that could never be filled, whose families waited years, sometimes decades, clinging to hope that they might see their loved ones again. Lost in the overdose deaths, quietly happening in bedrooms, bathrooms, cars, far from the gunfire, far from the news headlines, yet no less tragic. Lost in the countless lives destroyed indirectly, families shattered, neighborhoods terrorized, futures stolen before they even began. Every death, every disappearance, every life stolen is a mark on the ledger of an empire built not on dreams or ambition, but on fear and violence. And while the exact number may never be known, one thing is certain: the total is staggering. It is not measured in boardrooms or bank accounts. It is not measured in convoys of armored trucks, rifles, or grenades. It is measured in empty chairs at dinner tables, in graves hidden and exposed, in mothers who cry themselves to sleep, whispering their children's names into the dark, praying for a miracle that will never come, in fathers whose hearts carry a wound that never heals, every memory of laughter and life replaced by silence and absence, in children who grow up knowing that gunfire is normal, that masked men in convoys are part of life, and that one day, someone you love may vanish without warning. This is an empire not built on land or money, not built on influence or fame. It is an empire measured in graves, graves that stretch across towns, cities, and borders, graves that carry names, faces, and stories the world may never know. And while El Mencho walks free, untouchable, and powerful, the evidence of his reign is written in the lives he has stolen, in the families he has left behind, in the silence of empty rooms, in the permanent shadow of grief that will never fade. This is the legacy of one man's ambition, a legacy measured not in achievements, but in the staggering, immeasurable weight of human loss. History will remember many drug lords. Some ruled quietly, some tried to avoid attention, but El Mencho built something different, an organization that thrived on brutality, a cartel that expanded through terror, a reign marked by thousands of broken families and empty chairs at dinner tables. And while power can fade, while empires eventually collapse, the scars left behind by violence like this never truly disappear, because every number in a statistic, every body in a grave, every life lost in the chaos of the drug war was once a person, someone's child, someone's parent, someone who should have had the chance to grow old, someone whose laughter should have filled a home, someone whose dreams should have been realized, but they were taken, and all because somewhere along the way, a man decided that power was worth any price, even if that price was thousands of lives. And for those left behind, the pain lasts forever, forever in empty chairs, forever in quiet rooms, forever in hearts that will never fully heal, because some costs are too high, some losses too vast, to ever be measured or forgiven. And that is the true weight of an empire built on fear, blood, and violence. And thank you for staying with us until the end. These stories deserve to be remembered and told with care. If this episode moved you, please consider hitting like and subscribing. It's a small action that helps keep these voices from fading into silence. Until next time, listen closely. The whispers are never truly gone.